The bass. It's such a fun and versatile instrument to play. As a member of the rhythm section, you help to drive the band and define the harmony for the song. But you can also step into the spotlight and take a solo or even play a melody. Hi, my name is Dale Titus, and I'd like to welcome you to the Ultimate Beginners Series for the electric bass. More importantly, I'd like to welcome you to the wonderful and exciting world of playing the bass. In this tape, I'll be covering the fundamentals that you'll need to start on your journey to mastering your instrument. I'll show you the various parts of the bass, and I'll teach you how to tune and restring your instrument. I'll show you how to develop good picking and fretting technique, and I'll give you some great exercises that'll develop the strength and dexterity in both your hands. Lastly, I'll teach you how to create and play some common bass lines. First, let's pay a visit to an extremely busy musical trade show and see what different types of basses are out there. This is a 4-string fretted bass. It's the most commonly played bass today. Because of its simple design and versatility, it's a great instrument for beginners. This is a fretless bass. Because it has no frets on the fingerboard, it has a really distinctive sound. It's also much harder to play, so I don't recommend it for beginners. If you happen to have a fretless, the information on this video will still be very important for you. The 5- and 6-string basses are relatively new to the public, but are quickly gaining popularity. The extra strings allow the bass players to cover a wider range of pitches. Because of their wider necks and higher selling prices, I don't recommend them for someone who is just starting out. For the sake of this video, I'll use the 4-string fretted bass. Now let's take a closer look at a typical 4-string bass so you can learn the names and functions of all the parts. Starting at the top of the bass, this area is called the headstock. It's where the tuning keys are located. These keys are used to tighten and loosen the strings to keep your bass in tune. Between the headstock and the neck is the nut. The nut is used to keep the strings evenly spaced apart. Speaking of the strings, this is a good time to know the names and numbers for each string. This is the 1st string, which is also known as the G string because that is the note that it's tuned to. Next to it, you'll find the 2nd string, which is called the D string. Next, we come to the 3rd string, known as the A string. And lastly, we come to the 4th string, which is called the E string. On the fingerboard, these metal lines are called the frets, and they are also numbered. The fret closest to the headstock is the 1st fret, and the numbers get progressively higher as the frets get closer to the body. There are also markers on the fingerboard and the side of the neck that help you visually keep track of where you are. As we follow the strings down to the body, we see the pickups. The pickups act as microphones that transmit what you play to your amp. Also on the body is the bridge. On the bridge there are individual saddles that hold each string in place. The bridge and saddles also help to keep the strings equally spaced apart. Below the bridge, you find knobs that will control the tone and volume of your bass. If you can't figure out what your knobs do, go back to the store where you bought your bass and have somebody explain them to you. Lastly, we have the input jack. This is where you plug your cord in. Take some time to quickly memorize the names and functions of each of these parts. It will really help you out in the long run. We've talked a lot about basses, but now let's talk about amplifiers. I'm a professional bassist, and I use this big old rig here. But for many years, I didn't need something this big. When you're first starting out, you just want to look for an amp that's reliable, that has a good-sized speaker, and the most power that you can afford to buy. Power is not for volume, it's for clarity. And it's important to get as much as you can. If you have no idea where to start, go to your bass instructor or just a trusted friend who plays bass. Go down to a music store and play everything they have. Ask questions and make an informed decision. You'll be glad you did. Before you begin to play, you need to know how to tune up. The bass may have been in tune when you bought it, but hard playing, worn out strings, or even the weather can throw it out of tune. Tuning should become a habit every time you pick up your bass, and soon it'll become second nature. Here's how. We're going to start tuning from our lowest string, the E string. Now, when I mean low, it's not like we're used to in the real world, where low is closest to the floor and high is closest to the ceiling. In the music world, we use low and high in reference to pitch. So since the E string is the lowest pitch string, that's what I mean by low. We're going to start by getting a reference tone. That's a tone that you'll match your bass to make sure you're in tune with the records you play to or other members of your band. You can get a reference tone by buying a tuning fork, a pitch pipe. Some of your metronomes will have a reference tone on them. Or if you have a piano around, you can go to the E below middle C, hit it, and match your E string to that to make sure you're in tune. My E string is already in tune, so we're going to tune the rest of the bass to it. We do this by going to the 5th fret. We play the 5th fret on the E string, and then we play the A string open. Now, can you tell if the A string is lower than the E string or higher? If you can't tell, try playing them together and see if that helps. Now, in this case, I think it's lower, so I'm going to tighten up the A string until the waving goes away. There, it gets solid all of a sudden. Now we go to the A string because we believe it's in tune. We play the 5th fret also, and we play the open D. Now it's a little out of tune. Can you tell if it's higher or lower? I think it's higher, so I'm going to lower it by turning the tuning machine for the D string. When we're tuning, we want to tune up to the pitch. We don't want to come down to it. We want to tune up so there's more tension. So I'll drop it below. And you should hear it settle in. Now we'll go to the D string, play the 5th fret of the D string, and the G string. Is it higher or lower? It's actually pretty close. And you're going to want to just chime it, both notes together, just to check yourself. After you do this, you should be pretty much in tune. Another way to tune up is to use electronic tuners. Electronic tuners are used by almost everyone in the industry, and it takes all the mystery and guesswork out of it. I really rely on them myself. Most tuners will have either needles or lights that will tell you which string you're tuning and whether it's sharp or flat, and you'll be able to match it perfectly. Let's show you how mine works. Right here, I'll be hitting the G string, but it's showing that it's an F sharp and that it's sharp. So I need to continue to tighten the string till the G string light lights up. As it gets closer, the green light comes on and tells me that I'm in tune. Pretty simple, huh? Well, now that you know how to tune your bass, let's talk about how to change your strings. There are a few reasons why you're going to need to change your strings. One, of course, is if you break one. But strings will become dull sounding and harder to tune the longer you play on them. I'm going to change my G string here. One important note is don't remove all your strings at once, because that releases too much tension and it's not good for the neck. So I'm just going to take one string off at a time. On the G string, some people will cut the strings off to get them off quickly. I recommend that you just take them off by loosening the tuner and pull them off and save them, because you might need them if you break a string. So here we go. Quickly just take the G string off, take it out of the saddle here. Now make sure you're putting the right string on, because that could really ruin your day. You always look for the right number and name. Here's a replacement G string. Okay, the first thing is you want to seat it, which is putting the ball end into the bridge and get a good fix there. Now down here, we're going to make sure that we have enough windings. So I'm going to give myself a couple inches after the post here and clip it. Now this is probably the only tool you'll need when you change strings, which is some form of wire cutter. In this case, I'll use a needle nose plier with a wire cutting attachment there. Now I'm ready to wind the string on. So with most basses, they'll have the split top tuning peg, which is really a dream to use. All you need to do is take the tip of the string, put it down the center of the post. It'll go into a hole and then it'll stop, and that's when it's ready to go. You always want to wind your strings so the strings go from toward the middle of the headstock and out. So the strings wind out like that. That's what we're going to do. So once the string is in the middle here, you bend it down, pull it tight, and then just start winding. As you wind, keep pressure on the string so it winds tight and nice, and the windings move toward the headstock and not towards the tip of the post. This will give you better downward pressure and better tone and tuning stability. So we can just turn it quickly here. You'll start to tighten up. Just make sure you're on the saddle and that you're in the nut. And once you start feeling like it's pretty good tension, you just need to tune it and you're ready to go. Now remember, when you change strings, they're going to have an adjustment period where you're going to need to stretch them, maybe by grabbing them and snapping them against the fingerboard, retune. Do this until you find that they're staying in tune consistently. Once you get it in tune, you're going to want to keep it clean so the strings will be bright and have a longer life. You can use actual string cleaners you can buy at the store, or you might just want to try some rubbing alcohol and a clean cloth. If you do tune up and you followed everything as I've said, and the bass still doesn't seem to play right, still seems to be out of tune, you're going to want to take it to a store where you bought it and have someone look at it, because the repairman will need to check some other adjustments. Now that we've covered tuning up, let's play. Let's talk about picking. There are basically two ways to pick the bass. One is to use an actual pick, and the other is to play with the two fingers of your right hand, your index and middle fingers. If you're going to play with a pick, I recommend a medium or heavy pick. It'll give you the best action off of the strings. Now the pick will give you a sound that's a little brighter and has a little more attack than if you play with your index and middle finger. It'll also allow you to play quicker on single lines like this. For the purpose of this video, and because it's the most common technique, I'm going to be showing you how to play with your two fingers of your right hand. There are some fundamentals that you'll need to memorize and use to make sure this technique will operate for you. Basically, the primary one is to always anchor your thumb on some place of your bass. Now, I recommend, and most players will, put the thumb on the top of their pickup, so it's a good reference place and it'll give you more strength as you play. Also, another basic rule is to always alternate with the fingers, using the index one time, the next time using the middle, and back and forth evenly. It'll be better for you to sound smoother, and you'll have more speed and control if you can do this. Now, as you're alternating, when you're playing, it's okay to let the finger play one string and rest on the string next to it. That actually works as a good mute, and it's something that you just will incorporate into your playing. Now, let me give you an open string exercise that will concentrate on developing your coordination with just your right hand. So in this case, you can actually just mute the strings with your left hand so nothing comes through. And we're going to start by playing 4 times on each string, like this. So how will you know when you have enough technique to move on to other areas? Well, let me play at a certain tempo. See if you can play with me. If you can, then you probably have enough technique to go on. If you can't, stop tape, work on it, and then come back and see if you can play with me. Here we go. Now let's try it a little bit faster. Once you've got a little coordination in your right hand, you're ready to move on to your left hand, developing some basic fretting technique. There's just a few rules you need to keep in mind here. One is try to keep the thumb on the back of the neck when you play. This is going to be good for about 90% of your playing, so it's a good habit to get into. Another point about fretting technique is to play right behind the fret whenever possible. If you play too much on the fret, you get a rattle and you don't get good consistent tone. So try to play right behind the fret. Also, try to maintain a 1 finger per fret hand spacing. What that means is that your fingers will divide the fingerboard so 1 finger plays in each fret area. This keeps you from playing like this and having bad technique and bad sound. Also, try to maintain an air space in the palm of your hand so you don't grip the bass tightly and ruin your technique. Lastly, try to stay on your fingertips unless you're barring, because that'll give you a more clean attack and better tone. Here's a simple exercise that'll help you to develop good, clean fretting technique. Also, while you're doing this exercise, make sure that your right hand picking technique is alternating consistently. The exercise is really easy to learn. Basically start on your first fret on your E string. You're going to play just 1 time, then you're going to play the fret right next to it, the fret right next to that, and the fret right next to that. It's okay to leave your fingers down after you've played as long as you're playing on the same string, because that'll make it easier to get a good solid tone and it's cleaner sounding. Next we'll go to the A string, same thing, starting on the first fret. The D string and the G string. When you get to the top of the exercise and you're stopped just where I did now, move up 1 fret, play the note, and play the same exercise backwards. This way, you'll slowly work your way up the neck and develop good solid technique all over the bass. Let me work up a little bit of tempo here so you can try to keep up with me. Watch your right hand alternation. This is a great exercise for you to use to develop your technique up and down the neck of the bass. I recommend that every day that you pick up the bass, spend about 5 minutes going through it so you can develop good, strong, consistent technique. Now that we've begun to learn how to play the bass, let's spend some time and learn the names of the notes that you'll be playing. It's vital to your future as a bassist to know where all the notes are located on the bass. It will make jamming with other musicians much easier. It has been said that there is no real money above the 5th fret. Although that is meant as a joke, a bass player can do a lot of playing within the first 5 frets. It's for that reason that I'm going to concentrate only on those notes in this video. Before you can fully understand how the notes are laid out on the neck, you have to understand the musical alphabet. The musical alphabet is made up of the letters A through G. On the bass, most notes of the alphabet are separated by 1 fret, except for the E and F and B and C notes, which are right next to each other. Let's look at that in more detail. Starting with the open E string, the first fret is F. Remember that there is no space between the E and F notes. From the F note, we skip a fret and then we have G. From G, we skip the 4th fret and that makes the 5th fret A. As you learned in the section about tuning, the 5th fret on the E string is the same as the open note on the A string. From the open A, we skip a fret, which makes the 2nd fret B. C, as I mentioned before, is 1 fret above B. From there, we skip a fret, which makes the 5th fret D. Moving to the D string, the 2nd fret is E, the 3rd fret is F, and the 5th fret is G. Finally, on the G string, we have A on the 2nd fret, B on the 4th fret, and C on the 5th fret. The notes that we skipped have names that are related to the notes that I just showed you. For instance, the note between F and G is called either F sharp or G flat, depending on the direction you're heading. Since learning the notes on your neck is mostly simple memorization, you can practice it without your bass even being in your hands. Just pull out a piece of paper, draw a neck with the strings and frets on it, and then fill in the notes. If you can remember how the musical alphabet is constructed, then this shouldn't be very hard. Now, let's talk about how to create some common bass lines. First of all, in many musical situations, the one note that you play the most is the root of whatever chord is being played at the time. And that's perfectly okay. Occasionally, you'll want to play some other notes to add some color to your bass line. So you can turn to arpeggios to find which notes to use. An arpeggio is made up from the notes of the chord played one at a time. Let's start with the arpeggio from a very common chord type, the major chord. A major arpeggio is made up of the notes of a major chord, which are the root, the major third, and the perfect fifth. An easy way to play this arpeggio is to always start the root with your middle finger on your fretting hand. That makes the third easily in reach by your index finger, and the pinky can grab the fifth really simply. This is great because now you can move this arpeggio around easily just knowing the root of the chord you're playing against. In this case, G, C, D, G. Now let's play over a track and demonstrate this arpeggio several ways. First of all, first time through the track, we'll play just the root. So every time the chord goes by, just play the root. Get used to where the root's laid on the neck. Second time, play the straight arpeggio. And the last time we go through it, we'll play a little variation that sounds kind of like a blues bass line. So let's try that with the track. Great. Now, if you had a hard time keeping up with me, stop the tape and play over the patterns until they become more comfortable. You may want to use a metronome so that you practice in consistent time. Once you feel you've got it together, start the tape and see if you can play along smoothly and comfortably. Now, let's cover a different kind of arpeggio for a different kind of chord, and that's the minor chord. The minor chord is made up a little different than the major. It has the root, the minor third, which in this case is located on the same string as the root, and the perfect fifth. Now, this is a great pattern here and a position to play it because you can always start the chord or the arpeggio with your first finger. This way, just like in the major arpeggio, if you're playing G minor, you can go, then you can play C minor, D minor, and you can do it real simply by just keeping the same pattern for any chord. Let's also consider, what if we wanted to play the arpeggio with an open string as the root? Well, now we have to change our position a little bit. Let's say we're doing an E minor. We'd have the open E. We go up 3 frets from the string, the open string we're playing, and we play the third. We go up 1 string and down 1 fret and grab the fifth. Real simple. So now our pattern for using open strings would be, now that stays consistent even when we play on the A string and the D. With this next progression, we're going to use all minor chords and a combination of open position and closed position arpeggios. The first chord is A minor, so you'll play it like this. Next chord, D minor. You're going to move to B minor, and you have to use a closed position here. And then E minor. We'll also use a different rhythmic feel, and we'll play some variations. The basic feel we'll use is based off of eighth notes. Previously, in the major arpeggio groove, we played all on the downbeat if you're tapping your foot to the rhythm. That's called quarter notes. Now we're going to play when the foot goes down and up, which is eighth notes. So the first time we play it, we'll play just the roots. So we'll play A, D, B, and E. Next time we'll play the arpeggio, but we'll play 2 eighth notes per note of the arpeggio, like this. The last time through the progression, we'll play a very popular rock bass line, where we play most of the measure as a root, and we end with 2 notes of the arpeggio, like this. So let's remember that, put it all together, and play with the track. Let's take a moment to talk about practicing. After all, it's through practice that you'll get really good. When I played earlier to the progressions, I had a sequencer that played chords and drums for me. But you don't really need that. You can use a metronome, or even better yet, a drum machine. A drum machine will give you the feel of a drummer and is more interesting and fun to play to. I've set up my drum machine, so now we can play through some of the harder sections of those progressions and make sure we've got them under our fingers. Let's take the major arpeggio progression, starting on G, and really work it up. Let's take the final variation that we used on the major arpeggio progression, since it was the one that involved more finger movement. It was maybe a little trickier to play. Starting on G, we'll play G for a while. Ready? Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Make it smooth. Let's move to C. And now. Simple. Up to D. 3, 4. That was harder. How's it feel? Now let's move back to C. 3. Let's go up, back up to D, and D. Let's make a move to G. Now. Let's go to D. Not now. 1, 2, 3, 4. That was tough. Might want to practice that several times on your own. Let's go to G. 3, 4. Great. That's a killer way to practice to make sure you're developing good technique and some confidence in your playing. Now, let's go to the minor progression. Take the final variation in that one, which is also a little trickier to play, and really work it out. So we'll be starting on A minor, and I'll call out the chords as they go by. So let's try this. Here we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Just on A minor. Really listen to the drums. Now let's go to D. Now. Stay on it. We'll go to B. Let's try going to E now. How's it feel? Back to A. To D. Now. Just feel it good. To B. Now. Back to E. Now. Great. Again, this is a great way to practice, get your technique up, develop some confidence, and be able to move on to trickier bass lines in the future. Well, that's it. Our time is up for now, but there's a lot of information on this tape for you to practice. So rewind the tape and make sure that you understand all the areas that we covered. Right now, your ears can be great teachers for you. Just take out some of your favorite CDs or tapes and listen to what the bass player is doing. Also, focus in on what the drummer is playing, because that will help you prepare for the next tape in the series, where I'll show you how to play with the drummer. I'll also be teaching you some basic blues bass lines, how to slap the bass, and much, much more. So I'll see you then.
you.